Brother used my identity to take out loans, then blamed me when collectors arrived, forcing me to track transactions and discover he planned to leave the country while I faced legal trouble alone without in the family willing to stand with me. I'm Elliot, 30, and I never thought a family could betray you in the quietest ways until it happened to me. I grew up in Toledo with my younger brother, Camden, who's 28 now, and our parents, Harold, 61, and Joan, 59. Our house was small, but it was ours, cluttered with dusty trophies from Little League and science fairs, and the kind of living room couch that had seen better decades. Camden was always the golden child, smarter than me, smoother, more charming, and somehow everyone seemed to forgive him for things I would have been scolded for until my ears bled. I worked part-time through college, delivered pizzas, and saved every penny, while Camden had a way of borrowing money from anyone who would hand it over. I had a steady job now, a quiet life in Chicago, and I thought I was free from the chaos of those years. Then, out of nowhere, the call came. Collections. Threatening letters. Calls I couldn't answer fast enough. Loans taken out in my name. Big ones. Enough to ruin me financially. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I have a clean record. I pay my bills. I called the banks, the debt collectors, and they kept repeating the same words, the same accusations. You're responsible for these loans, Mr. Elliot. My heart sank. It couldn't be me, could it? I started tracking transactions online, logging each payment, cross-referencing dates. That's when it hit me. Camden. It had to be him. Every loan application listed my personal info, but every withdrawal, every suspicious transfer lined up with his spending habits. Gas stations he always stopped at on the way to his stupid rock band practices, weird electronics stores he claimed he needed for some project. I confronted him via text first, thinking maybe I was wrong. His responses were calm, too calm, almost rehearsed. What loans? He said. I don't know what you mean. Check again. But I didn't need him to admit it. I dug deeper. I found out he had booked a one-way flight to Brazil, claiming it was a work thing, but all evidence pointed to a permanent escape. My stomach dropped. Not only had he ruined me financially, he planned to leave the country, leaving me alone to handle the legal fallout. Our parents? Harold told me bluntly. He's your brother. We don't want to get involved. Joan whispered over the phone. Maybe he made a mistake. Try to forgive. Forgive? Forgive him for almost destroying my life? I spent nights poring over bank statements, making calls to the IRS, local courts, every single credit bureau. I felt like I was in a maze with no exit, my anxiety twisting my chest, my hands trembling every time a new letter arrived. I remember one night, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from Camden. You're overreacting. Relax. Overreacting? I wanted to scream into the void, wanted to tell him he had no idea what it felt like to face collections alone, while your own parents shrug. I went to the police to file a report, but they said it was civil, not criminal. I was alone in the fight. I remember sitting in my small kitchen, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the glowing laptop screen, thinking of all the vacations, birthday parties, and weekend hangouts I had ignored to build a life where I could be safe, only to have it ripped out by the person I trusted most. My hands ached from writing letters, my eyes stung from reading fine print I never cared about before. I kept imagining Camden on a plane, sipping caipirinhas, laughing at the chaos he left behind. But I couldn't panic. I couldn't cry. Not yet. I made lists, detailed charts of every transaction, every email, every casual lie he had thrown in, hoping I could trace enough to prove he did this deliberately. I became obsessed. Friends started asking why I was disappearing, why I wasn't answering calls, why I seemed drained all the time. I couldn't tell them. Embarrassment and shame tied my tongue. This wasn't just about money, it was about betrayal, about the family I thought I could rely on being nowhere to be found. Somewhere in the middle of tracking the loans, I found one of his withdrawals that shocked me more than anything, a deposit to a local travel agency labeled International Exit Strategy. That's when I realized he wasn't just running from debt, he was running from responsibility entirely. I could feel my chest tighten. This was no longer a sibling squabble. This was a test of my resilience, of my sanity. I needed to stop him before he left the country and left me facing court dates, late fees, and ruined credit alone. I called my bank again, this time demanding a fraud alert, freezing accounts, everything I could. Camden texted back with short, dismissive answers. "Relax, you'll be fine. I've got this under control." I wanted to throw the phone. I wanted to tell him I didn't want control from a man who betrayed his own family. I had to be methodical. Over the next 2 weeks, I traced each withdrawal, built a timeline, documented patterns. I even contacted the airline, using my little knowledge from previous work trips to figure out his ticket details. I felt like a private investigator in my own life, which was absurd, but it was the only way forward. Every day I grew more tired, but more determined. This wasn't just money. It was my dignity, my sense of trust, everything I had held on to. And somewhere in the middle of this chaos, I realized something painful. I didn't just feel betrayed. I felt invisible to my own parents. I had spent years thinking they'd have my back no matter what. But here I was, wading through debt, legal letters, and lies alone. I started calling distant relatives, friends of friends, anyone who might know Camden's habits. I had to find leverage, proof that would stop him from leaving, from abandoning me entirely. And then, one evening, a breakthrough. A misclick in the bank app revealed a recurring payment I hadn't noticed. It was set to a mailbox rental in Florida. He had a P.O. box, maybe an attempt to create a new identity. My stomach sank. That was it. That was the smoking gun I needed to prevent him from disappearing with my life in shambles. I realized that every loan, every withdrawal, every lie had been planned meticulously. I had to act fast. I started drafting emails to banks, attaching my evidence, requesting freezes, reporting fraud. I made calls that stretched past midnight, arguing, demanding, explaining. I didn't cry, not yet. I just worked, traced, documented, built the case against him, all while hoping my parents might intervene, but they didn't. The reality hit me like a freight train. Family doesn't always mean protection. Sometimes it just means a complicated web of obligations, expectations, and disappointments. I remember lying awake that night, staring at the ceiling, trying to breathe, trying to figure out how someone could look at their own brother and think, "I'll ruin him, he'll deal with it." The anger, the fear, the exhaustion, it all mixed into a hollow weight I carried into the next day, determined, methodical, refusing to let him win. I had to reclaim my life, even if it meant doing it entirely alone. I remember the next morning, still tense from the night before, my coffee gone cold, staring at my laptop like it might finally give me answers on its own. I had uncovered Camden's Florida mailbox, but that was just a piece of the puzzle. I needed more, something concrete to stop him from leaving the country. I called the travel agency he'd booked with, pretending I was a corporate client, and asked about international travel policies. The person on the line didn't know it yet, but they were giving me the lifeline I needed. Camden had booked a one-way ticket to Sao Paulo, but it was flagged for a pending payment. I immediately froze his accounts wherever I could, contacted credit agencies, and requested fraud alerts. Every time I spoke to someone on the phone, I tried to stay calm, but my hands shook and my voice wavered. I kept imagining Camden in an airport lounge, laughing, oblivious, while I navigated this nightmare alone. My parents still didn't intervene. Harold said, "He's your brother. Handle it yourself." Joan begged me to forgive him, but forgiveness felt impossible when he had been planning this behind my back for months. I started piecing together his financial footprint. There were dozens of transactions under my name, hundreds of dollars here and there, enough to make my life a mess legally. I realized I had to get ahead of it, track every single loan, and maybe even contact some of the debt collectors myself, just to stall them until the evidence was clear. I became obsessed, living in a haze of spreadsheets, late-night calls, and anxious pacing. My friends noticed I was distant, always distracted, but I couldn't explain. I couldn't admit my own brother had betrayed me so completely. I started keeping a diary of events, a timeline with dates, times, and amounts, labeling each transaction, each suspicious withdrawal. One night, I stumbled across a transfer to a tech startup he claimed he was investing in, but the company didn't exist. That was when it clicked. Camden had no plan to pay any of this back. He was running, disappearing, leaving me to take the fall entirely. My stomach churned. I called him directly, trying to reason with him. "Cam, we need to talk." This has gone too far." His voice was calm, even soothing. "Relax, you're overthinking it. I'll handle things." I wanted to throw the phone, wanted to scream. "You're ruining my life, Camden. This is my credit, my future." But he just laughed, a cold, calculated laugh, before hanging up. That laugh haunted me for days. I couldn't trust anyone else in my family either. My parents refused to step in, claiming neutrality. I realized, painfully, that family loyalty only went as far as they wanted it to. I started reaching out to my brother's friends, hoping to track him, hoping someone might tell me where he was going or what his plans were. I even hired a private investigator, though I was terrified of spending money I barely had, just to keep Camden from disappearing completely. Each day felt like walking through molasses. The stress was physical, pounding headaches, stomach cramps, trembling hands. I remember one evening, late, scrolling through emails, when I found something that nearly made me collapse. Camden had applied for a second passport under my name, using forged documents. I felt like I was being punched in the gut. This wasn't just financial betrayal, it was identity theft, criminal, dangerous. I had to act fast. I called the embassy, reported the fraud, and prepared myself for legal battles I had never imagined I would face. Every interaction was draining, and I realized I had been naive to think that a brother would ever betray you like this. I thought about the childhood we shared, Camden's sly grin, the way he used to trick me into giving up my lunch money. It was funny then, terrifying now. Somewhere in the middle of this chaos, I got a call from a debt collector who had been relentless for weeks. I calmly explained the situation, provided documentation, and asked for them to hold off, citing fraud and ongoing investigation. I could hear skepticism in their voice, but they agreed for now. That temporary reprieve felt like a lifeline. I started sleeping in bursts, exhausted but too anxious to rest for long. Every sound outside my apartment made me jump. I imagined Camden sneaking past, trying to claim the freedom he had schemed for, while I faced ruin. I didn't just feel betrayed, I felt abandoned. Yet deep inside, a tiny stubborn part of me refused to let him win. I mapped every bank, every transaction, every airline route. I made backups of all evidence, scanned documents, printed out copies. I didn't want to leave anything to chance. I had to protect myself because no one else would. The weight of responsibility crushed me, but also focused me. I had to be smart, deliberate, ruthless if necessary. I started considering legal representation, researching fraud cases, preparing to confront Camden directly if he didn't comply. It was terrifying, but I couldn't let fear stop me. I had to reclaim control. At some point, I realized the betrayal wasn't just about money or identity. It was about trust, about the family bond one thought existed, about knowing that someone you grew up with could plan to leave you in ruin without hesitation. I began thinking strategically, like a chess game where every move could cost me dearly. I contacted every possible authority, every institution, ensuring nothing would slip past. And yet, amidst this chaos, I also found a strange clarity. Camden's betrayal forced me to see my own strength, my own resourcefulness. I could navigate this mess, protect myself, and maybe even stop him before he left. It was exhausting, terrifying, and infuriating, but I couldn't stop. I realized, painfully, that sometimes family doesn't protect you. Sometimes you have to protect yourself. And I would, no matter how long it took. The morning after I thought I had everything under control, I got a text that made my stomach drop. Camden had booked a flight for that evening. Not just a flight, but a red-eye international ticket. I slammed my laptop shut, pacing my tiny living room, trying to think, trying to breathe. Time was the problem, every second counted. I called the airline, gave them his name, my evidence, and begged them to flag his passport or hold the ticket. The clerk on the phone sounded sympathetic, but the bureaucracy was maddening. "We can't stop him without legal documentation," she said. Legal documentation. Great. I didn't have lawyers yet, I didn't have court orders, and I couldn't afford to waste another minute. It was time to escalate. I called a local attorney I barely knew, someone who specialized in fraud and identity theft, and laid out the situation. He said calmly, "You need an emergency injunction to stop him from leaving. I can file it immediately, but we need evidence fast." Evidence. I had spreadsheets and emails and screenshots, and scanned IDs and bank statements, and every tiny transaction I could find. I emailed it all, my hands trembling. I couldn't believe it had come to this. Camden, my brother, was planning a clean getaway while I faced financial ruin. My parents still did nothing. Harold muttered something about boys being boys when I pressed him, and Joan avoided my calls altogether. I was on my own. Anger alone wasn't going to save me. That's when I realized I needed to be strategic, methodical, cold. I spent the afternoon on the phone, filing online fraud reports, and checking every airline route. Each call was a marathon, each hold music a reminder that I was fighting an invisible clock. At around 5 p.m. came a message from Camden. Relax. It's all under control. Stop freaking out. Stop freaking out? I laughed, a bitter sound that startled my neighbor when I did it. He had no idea. No one did. I was the one who would face the courts, the letters, the late fees, the stress, and he was sitting in some lounge somewhere, sipping drinks, probably texting friends about the chaos he'd caused. I had to move. I left my apartment and drove to the courthouse, documents in hand, my mind racing through every scenario. I met with the clerk, explained the situation, and after what felt like an eternity, she guided me to the right judge, someone who agreed to review my emergency injunction. I watched the clock, my heart hammering, as the judge read my documents, asked pointed questions, and finally nodded. Camden's passport was flagged. His flight was temporarily suspended. Relief hit me in waves, but it was short-lived. I knew this wasn't over. I had delayed him, but the fight wasn't finished. I returned home, exhausted, but determined to track his next move. I reviewed every transaction again, cross-referencing with the airline, with his digital footprint, his emails, even his social media activity. There was a pattern, a careless mistake he had made when booking a hotel under an alias. I immediately called the authorities and provided the location. Within hours, they had put a hold on that, too. Camden was clever, but not infallible. I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion, rage, and empowerment. I had been forced to become a strategist, a detective, a lawyer in my own right. My parents still didn't intervene. Harold said nothing. Joan offered hollow words of forgiveness. I realized that I couldn't rely on them, and I couldn't forgive Camden yet, not while the threat of him abandoning me lingered. That night, I finally collapsed into my bed, exhausted beyond belief. Sleep came in fits, interrupted by panic dreams of him boarding a plane, of letters piling up, of my identity being erased. But in those moments, I also saw flashes of my own resilience. I had traced every transaction, blocked every withdrawal, frozen accounts, and coordinated with authorities. I realized something essential. I had the power to stop him, even alone. Over the next several days, I continued to track his movements meticulously, obsessively. I made sure every loan he had taken in my name was documented, every transaction logged, every phone call recorded. It was exhausting, but necessary. I became hyper-aware of my surroundings, nervous whenever my phone buzzed, suspicious of every email. The fight had changed me. I had gone from being a somewhat carefree 30-year-old to someone acutely aware of betrayal, of the fragility of trust. Camden had forced me to grow, to become vigilant, and in a strange way, I welcomed it. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was actively reclaiming control of my life. And then, the breakthrough came. A misstep from Camden, a small one, an overlooked email sent to a friend, gave me the evidence I needed to prove he had planned everything. The loans, the identity theft, the impending escape. I compiled the evidence, sent it to my attorney, and we prepared the case to confront him legally. I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The confrontation would be messy. There would be anger, denial, maybe even more lies. But for the first time in weeks, I felt the possibility of resolution. I had fought through sleepless nights, anxiety, betrayal, and isolation. I had discovered that family could fail you, that the people closest to you could plan to destroy you. But I had also discovered my own strength. I was ready. Ready to face Camden, ready to face the fallout, ready to reclaim my life. And as I sat at my desk, reviewing the final set of documents, I realized something bittersweet. I had grown, but at the cost of my innocence, my trust, and a sense of security I had taken for granted. I had learned painfully that sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the worst. But I was no longer helpless. I was prepared, determined, and resolute. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a small, cautious sense of hope. The day finally came when I had to confront Camden in person. I drove to his apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my stomach twisting. 30 minutes earlier, my attorney had reviewed everything, told me to stay calm, and reminded me that I had the law on my side. But staying calm felt impossible. I remembered every sleepless night, every anxious call, every letter threatening my financial future, all because of him. I rang the doorbell, and Camden opened it, looking the same smug, infuriating way he always had, like he had the upper hand. "Elliot," he said, feigning surprise. "What brings you here?" I swallowed my rage, keeping my voice even. "We need to talk. Now." I handed him a copy of all the documentation: loans, bank transfers, credit applications, emails, airline tickets. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, before he smiled, arrogant, dismissive. "You've been busy," he said lightly. I couldn't believe the nerve. I slammed the stack of papers onto his counter. "This is not a game, Camden. You plan to ruin me and run away. I've got proof, the authorities know, and you're not leaving anywhere until this is fixed." For a second, I thought I saw him panic, a tiny crack in his armor, but then he covered it with a laugh, a nervous chuckle. "Look, I didn't think it would get this far," he muttered, trying to downplay it. "I thought we'd figure it out between us." "Figure it out?" I wanted to scream. "Figure it out? You're the reason I've spent the last month tracking your every move, calling banks, freezing accounts, fighting legal battles alone." His face shifted from smug to uneasy, realizing that I wasn't bluffing. I could see the calculation in his eyes. How to weasel out of this, how to spin it, but I had already covered every angle. "Camden," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "I don't know what made you think you could betray your brother and get away with it. But you're not leaving. You're going to fix this. Every loan, every payment, every fraudulent transaction. You're going to take responsibility." For the first time, he didn't have a ready response. He swallowed, fidgeted with the edge of the counter, and muttered something about making arrangements. I didn't buy it. I handed him the contact information for the banks and authorities. "Start calling. Start fixing it. Now." Silence. Then, finally, he nodded reluctantly, a defeated tilt to his head. I left his apartment that day feeling exhausted, relieved, and wary all at once. The fight wasn't over entirely. He still had to make amends, and the bank still had to verify everything, but the immediate threat of him running away was gone. I had stopped him. I had reclaimed control of my life. Walking to my car, I felt a strange emptiness. My parents never called, never checked in, never acknowledged the ordeal. I realized that family loyalty wasn't something I could count on anymore. I would have to define it for myself. Over the next few weeks, Camden slowly corrected the mess, reluctantly paying off what he could, while authorities documented everything. I monitored each step, wary of any misstep, hyper-alert, but slowly, the weight began to lift. I could finally breathe, though cautiously. I started reconnecting with friends I had ignored, slowly rebuilding a sense of normalcy, a sense that my life was mine again. And yet, the betrayal lingered, a shadow I couldn't ignore. I found myself replaying every childhood memory with him, wondering how the boy I shared a room with, the brother I trusted, could grow into someone capable of such deception. It hurt deeply in ways that weren't just financial. It was about trust, safety, family bonds that didn't hold up when tested. But I had learned something vital about myself. I could survive betrayal, face it head-on, and come out stronger. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't powerless. I was vigilant, resourceful, and determined. And I had made sure that Camden knew, in no uncertain terms, that I would not be discarded, that I would not be a casualty of his recklessness. Life slowly returned to its rhythm. I went back to work, spent time with friends, even allowed myself to laugh again. But I carried the lessons with me: the vigilance, the skepticism, the recognition that family doesn't always protect you and sometimes you have to protect yourself. Camden's betrayal was a wound, but one that forced growth, resilience, and self-reliance. I still think about him, about the brother I once trusted, and about how close I came to losing everything. It stings, but it also steels me. I've faced the abyss he created, navigated the chaos, and emerged still standing. And I know, now more than ever, that I can face anything life throws at me, even when the people you think you can count on turn out to be the ones plotting against you. I don't know if Camden will ever truly understand the gravity of what he did. I don't know if he'll ever change. But I do know this: I reclaimed my life, piece by piece, day by day, and I survived the storm he created. And that, in itself, is a victory.